The rancher dug a well, then found a staircase leading to underground voices. John Calloway had lived on his ranch for as long as he could remember. The heat of the desert sun had kissed his skin, the dry winds had whispered across the plains, and the stars had twinkled overhead each night, all part of the same routine he had known for years. Solitude Ridge, a small farming town nestled on the edge of a distant desert planet, had been home to him for as long as he could recall. But for the past few seasons, things had changed. The rains had been scarce, and the wells he relied on to sustain his cattle and crops had begun to dry up. The land that had always been generous had turned hostile, leaving John no choice but to dig another well. It wasn't something he wanted to do, but the other wells were running low, and if he didn't find water soon, he'd lose everything. The air was thick with dust as John climbed into his old transport vehicle, heading toward the far side of his property where he intended to begin digging. His ranch stretched for miles, and he had seen it all. Empty stretches of dirt, the slow grow of his herd, and the steady march of time. Yet now, the familiar landscape felt ominous, like a silent predator watching from the shadows. "Come on, old girl," John muttered, coaxing his trusty drill to start as he began digging into the dry earth. The machine groaned in protest, but John had learned long ago that patience was essential. Digging for water in these harsh conditions required slow and steady work, and so he continued. The sun hung low in the sky as he drilled deeper into the earth, the day slipping away. For hours, he had only the sound of the drill and the occasional thud as he hit rock or clump of dried soil. Just as he thought he had hit another layer of hard clay, the drill suddenly stopped. It wasn't like any of the other times when the drill had stuck in rock. It was as though it had hit something solid, something impenetrable. John cursed under his breath, and with a groan of frustration he climbed out of the vehicle and went to inspect the drill. Something was off. He could feel it in the pit of his stomach, that nagging feeling that this wasn't just another rock. He tugged at the machine, trying to free it from whatever it was lodged in. After a few moments of struggle, the drill came loose, and John was met with a curious sight. The hole was deeper than expected, and the walls of the shaft were smooth and metallic, gleaming faintly in the dimming light. John scratched his beard, confused. It wasn't the kind of rock or soil he had been digging through. The metal had a strange pattern to it, unlike anything he had seen before. It was old, ancient even, but unlike anything that had been left behind by the mining companies that used to work this area. His curiosity piqued, John decided to widen the hole and investigate further. He dug deeper, exposing more of the metal surface. It looked like a door, rusted and worn, but unmistakably a door. It was built into the side of the well's wall, leading down into the earth beneath his feet. John had heard the stories, the myths about ancient cities buried under the surface of the planet, the whispered tales of alien structures left behind by civilizations long gone. But none of it seemed real, not to him. They were just stories, and he was a man of practicalities. He didn't believe in old legends, but here he was, staring at something he couldn't explain. The door didn't belong to any civilization he knew about. With a sigh, John wiped the sweat from his brow. He wasn't about to let a strange door stop him from finding water, so he carefully pried it open. The air that rushed out was cool, much cooler than he expected, and it smelled of age, of dust, and something he couldn't quite place. As he peered into the dark hole, he saw a narrow staircase winding down, leading into the earth below. He couldn't help but feel a chill run down his spine. "What in the world?" he muttered, taking a step closer to the opening. He hesitated for a moment, considering the risks, but what choice did he have? His farm was struggling, and this strange discovery could be a sign of something valuable deep below. John grabbed his flashlight from the tool bag in his truck, shining the beam down the staircase. The light flickered momentarily, but then it illuminated the worn steps leading into the unknown. The stone walls of the staircase seemed to stretch downward endlessly, and a shiver ran down his back. His mind raced. Could there really be something down there? His first instinct was to turn back, to return to the surface, and forget he had ever seen this strange doorway. But the thought of the water, the possibility of something hidden beneath his land, tempted him. John took a deep breath and began his descent down the stairs, the sound of his boots echoing softly around him. He felt the temperature drop as he moved deeper into the earth. The further he descended, the more oppressive the air felt, until it was as if he were walking into a long-forgotten tomb. Then, as he reached the bottom of the stairs, something strange happened. He heard a faint sound, a whisper. It was distant, like the faintest murmur carried on the wind, but it was there nonetheless. John froze. His heart raced, and he felt a creeping unease settle in his chest. The voices weren't in any language he recognized. They were foreign, filled with an unexplainable cadence. He couldn't make out the words, but there was a sense of urgency in them, as if they were trying to communicate something important. His mind reeled. Who or what could be speaking down here? And why? He glanced around the dimly lit chamber, but all he could see were old, crumbling stone walls. There was nothing that would explain the voices. It was as though they were coming from nowhere. His instincts screamed at him to turn around and leave, to return to his farm and forget this. But something kept him rooted to the spot. There was a mystery here, one that he couldn't resist. He took another step, and the voices grew louder, clearer. They weren't random noises. They were calling to him. John's boots scraped against the stone floor as he stepped further into the chamber. The air felt colder the deeper he went, and the whispering voices, faint but growing louder, seemed to swirl around him. He glanced over his shoulder but saw nothing, only the dark staircase leading back up to the surface. It was as if the voices were calling him to continue forward, to dive deeper into the mystery that lay beneath his feet. His heart raced as he walked cautiously toward the center of the room. The walls were made of smooth, polished stone, and strange, glowing symbols lined the surfaces, faintly pulsing with light. These weren't the simple markings he'd seen before in abandoned mines or ruins. These symbols were intricate and precise, as though carved by a highly advanced civilization. The more he explored the room, the more the strange symbols seemed to come alive, shifting slightly as his flashlight beam moved across them. John's mind buzzed with questions. How old was this place? Who had built it, and why? Why had it been hidden so deep below the surface? These were questions that felt too large to answer, and yet he knew he had to find the truth. The voices now seemed to take on a new tone, urgent and insistent. John stopped in his tracks. This time, the whispers were not just a random scattering of sounds. They formed words, distorted but clear enough to make out. "You must find it." John felt a chill in his bones. Was this some kind of warning? The thought of turning back crossed his mind, but it felt as though something or someone was pushing him forward. The voices had a strange pull, a sense of urgency that he couldn't ignore. Taking a deep breath, John made his way across the room, moving toward a large central structure that stood at the heart of the chamber. It was massive, an enormous cylindrical device made of the same strange metal as the door to the staircase. The surface of the structure was covered with more glowing symbols, and faint lines of energy flickered around its base, as though it were alive. John had no idea what it was. It could have been anything, a generator, a power core, or something far more dangerous. But one thing was certain. It was the source of the voices. As he approached it, the whispers grew louder, more intense, almost as if they were speaking directly to him. Awaken the power. John swallowed hard. He was out of his depth. He had always been a rancher, a man who understood the land and the rhythms of the natural world. This underground world, with its strange technology and mysterious voices, was something far beyond his experience. His fingers hovered over the control panel on the side of the cylinder. It was unlike any technology he had ever seen. The buttons were smooth and transparent, and the surface of the device seemed to react to his touch, as if it recognized him. He hesitated for a moment, unsure whether to continue. But the whispering voices kept calling, and the urgency in their tone left him with little choice. Without thinking, he pressed one of the buttons. The moment he did, the entire chamber seemed to come alive. A loud hum filled the air, followed by a low rumbling that shook the ground beneath his feet. John stumbled backward, his heart pounding in his chest. The symbols on the walls flickered brightly, and the lines of energy around the cylinder intensified. The voices, now speaking in a language he could understand, surged in volume. "Now you must complete what we started." John's mind raced. He had triggered something. The machine, or whatever it was activating, and with it the voices that had guided him here. The walls of the chamber began to tremble as the ancient technology stirred to life, and John realized with a sinking feeling that he might have just set something in motion that he couldn't control. Suddenly, a loud cracking sound echoed through the chamber, followed by a flash of blinding light. John raised his arm to shield his eyes, and when the light faded, he found himself staring at a massive opening in the center of the cylinder. The air around him crackled with energy, and he felt a strange pull, as though something deep within the machine was calling to him. John stepped closer, his heart racing in his chest. He didn't know what would happen next, but he felt an overwhelming sense of dread. He had no idea what the machine was or what it could do. All he knew was that it was powerful, ancient, and potentially dangerous. But it was also something he couldn't ignore. The power is yours to wield, but at a cost. The voice came again, clearer now, as if it was speaking directly into his mind. John flinched, instinctively reaching up to clutch his head. The voice wasn't just a sound anymore. It was a presence, a consciousness that seemed to seep into his thoughts. You must decide whether to release the power or seal it away forever. The weight of the decision pressed down on John. His hands trembled as he stood before the glowing core of the ancient machine. He could feel its energy, its potential coursing through the room. It was tempting, too tempting to ignore. But he also knew that he could be unleashing something far beyond his control. John took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. He glanced back toward the staircase that led to the surface. His ranch, his land, everything he had known was up there, waiting for him. But down here, in the darkness of the ancient chamber, lay the unknown. Make your choice, rancher.